Oh, we don't. Okay. We're going to hold off. We need a quorum. Okay, good afternoon. I would like to call the Higher Education Subcommittee to order. It's Wednesday, March the 5th. And I think we need to start by taking the roll. Madam Clerk, open the roll. Okay, and Madam Clerk, take the roll.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 members present. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Members, we've got 5 bills on the calendar today. I want to start out by saying that the first bill is going to be rolled 2 weeks. And we have received a request to take bill number 4 on the calendar, which is House Bill 407, off notice. So without objection, we're going to roll item number 1, House Bill 1324, 2 weeks, and we're going to take item number 4, House Bill 407, off notice. Absent objection, rolled and off notice. That brings us to item number 2 on the calendar, which is House Bill number 645, and that's Chairman Garrett. Chairman Garrett, you've got a motion and a second. You're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I appreciate the opportunity to present this piece of legislation. This legislation comes to me from the Western Governors College. And what it's doing is it's making this particular college eligible for the Ben Ashley Scholarship for their students so they can go to this particular college. And I want to explain to you a little bit about why I'm passionate about this piece of legislation. Many of you know I'm a lawyer, but I went to the Nashville School of Law, which was the non-traditional way that most folks go to law school, right? They come right out of undergrad. They don't usually have kids. It goes immediately. It's a 3-year institution. And when I went to law school, I had a child, and of course, the Nashville School of Law is a little bit more affordable when it comes to various different choices when you have. And it's a 4-year institution, and I worked full time. So what the Western Governors does is they have nurses, they have teachers, and other places where we need these type of jobs. And these jobs are very tough and affordable for some of these folks that are working to obtain. So what this does, it at least allows them to tap some state dollars that are already available to certain institutions. And so when a teacher or a nurse graduates here, one of the reasons why I thought this piece of legislation was also very important is most likely a large majority of these students stay here. This is a university that they have an office here in Franklin, but they don't have an actual building here. It is online. Lots of things are going that direction these days. So what this does, it opens up an opportunity that folks that are working, they may have kids. We desperately need nurses, and we desperately need teachers, and that's primarily what comes from these programs here at Western Governors. So that's why I'm supporting this legislation. I hope I can count on your vote to make sure these folks can go and get this opportunity, even though they may not be able to afford a traditional type of college. And I think I failed to say the average age is 33 to 34 years old of the folks that are going and utilizing this particular school. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions, but I hope I can have your support on allowing these folks to have an opportunity to get their college paid for.
Okay, members, you've heard the discussion, the explanation. Any questions? I've got a question or two about the budget. Lou Hanneman is registered to speak, and I'm going to invite him up to tell us a little bit about the amount of money we have allocated for this and the extent to which we have extra money in there. So absent objection, we'll go out of session, and I'm going to ask Mr. Hanneman to state your name, who you're with, and then give us an overview, if you can, of the dollars that are involved and how much extra we have in the account for this.
Sure. Yes, sir. Lou Hanneman with the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, as well as the Tennessee Student Assistance Corporation. The Tennessee Student Assistance Award is a general fund funded program. Currently, the appropriation sits at about $113 million annually for that program. A few years ago, we had finally reached a point where that pot of money was actually funding 100% of the eligible students in that program, which was a huge benchmark. Shortly after that, the federal government changed the way the federal application for financial aid was structured. And in doing so, they kind of opened up the door for a number of newly eligible families to pursue that money. The result on us with a fixed pot of funding is that we're now down to about 88%. Let's see, we had about 88,000 eligible students. We were able to provide funding for about 73% of them. And so, as we look to expanding additional institutions or anything like that, for us, while we're deferred on whether or not institutions are added, we're always, conscious of the impact on that funding. And as I understand, this has a little over a $2 million fiscal note, which again represents, roughly 1,200 students or so. Those would be 1,200 students who otherwise would have received this award.
And my understanding is that this is a pot of money that is allocated from the general fund. And so it's not a Hope Lottery scholarship. That's why this bill didn't go to the lottery calendar, is
Correct.
because it comes from the general fund. But the amount of money that's allocated is a recurring line item, but it's fully subscribed, which means there's no extra money.
Right. And historically, we've always treated this as a first come, first serve program. Just so happened that, again, we had 1 or 2 years where all students who were eligible were funded. But we're now, like I said, we're a little upside down in that space right now. I will say also that this is a needs-based program. So these are students who are low income and are otherwise eligible for the federal Pell Grant. So that's kind of the litmus on eligibility for this program. The Ben Ashley Grant, when it was established, didn't actually establish a funding source for the award. It just simply said students going to private institutions will get a little bit more of state aid. And so the only alternative we had was, at the time, we just doubled the Tennessee Student Assistance Award. And so whatever a student is eligible for, if you're attending a private Tennessee-based or domiciled institution, then you will get essentially double the Student Assistance Award. So that's how we've always historically done it.
And since the fund is fully subscribed, if we add WGU, then that means dollars that go to WGU would be dollars that wouldn't go to a student at another private university like Carson-Newman or Vanderbilt or Lipscomb.
I think short of, language, and I don't think there's language in here, but short of language that says, subject to funding available, or the addition, some appropriation line item to increase that $113 million pool to accommodate, the additional impact of the, the WGU students. Mindful again, though, that, we'll still be undersubscribed or oversubscribed to the program, but, would love to see, honestly, an increase in the TSAA. There is an increase scheduled in the governor's budget. We will still be not fully funded to cover all students. So,
Okay, so to get the Ben Ashley Opportunity Grant, you have to be a Tennessee nonprofit private institution. I guess my next question is, how do we determine who gets added to that pot? I mean, we're considering adding WGU. Would we have the option of adding other online institutions like University of Phoenix?
They would all have to come, I mean, for institutions that are not public institutions of higher education, or essentially, come down to basically TACUA institutions, any other institution has always sought an exception in the language. It's essentially a specific carve out to that specific institution. So whether it was WGU, University of Phoenix, or any other institution for that matter, that is outside of TACUA and outside of our public higher ed folks, would have to get a specific, language, much like this bill, that kind of identifies that institution and creates an exception.
Okay. And let me ask one more question, and then I'll give other members the opportunity to ask questions. My understanding from what I've been told from several people who have come to see me about this bill, this additional amount of money, the Ben Ashley Opportunity Grant, is for students at private universities. This supplement is added for them or given to them because private universities are typically more expensive. Low-income students at private universities need a little more assistance because the private universities have higher levels of tuition. Does that mean that we ought to where does Western Governors tuition rank relative to other private institutions like Vanderbilt or Carson Newman or Lipscomb? Those are the examples I gave earlier.
I think they come in pretty far under, those particular institutional tuitions. I'm not sure that they have a different kind of tuition model. One, I think they have a rolling admissions, but they do it in blocks. I would certainly defer to, their team for the specifics on that. But they are a much cheaper alternative than some of the more expensive privates. They're not cheaper than all of them. But you made a good point. The purpose of the Ben Ashley grant, going back to its origin, the legislative intent was recognizing that Tennesseans attending, Tennessee private institutions do face a little bit higher tuition than the public students. And so this was an attempt to simply offset that for low-income students.
Okay. Other questions for Lou Hanneman from committee members? Oh, Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sir, for being here. Just to be clear, so this is not the lottery money. This is not the lottery money that is used for public institutions, correct?
I'll split your comment. It's not lottery money. It's general fund money, but it is a scholarship program that has two components. It has a component that's eligible for all public institutions, and that's the Tennessee Student Assistance Award. From that same pot of money, for students attending private school, there's an additional amount that Tennessee Student Assistance Award is augmented by doubling it for students attending private institutions. But it's all from the same pool of funds. And those are general fund funds.
Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So would any students attending the public institutions, would any of them be shorted? Basically, would someone not be able to utilize any of that money if we gave this money to WTU?
Well, looking at the numbers specifically, so we do this on a first come, first serve basis. And so, it's hard to tell from one year to the next. We do start off every funding year with students who had previously received the award. So if, say, you came in last year as a freshman, this year as a sophomore, you're first in the line to receive funding, okay? For new students added into the program, the fiscal note on this bill is $2 million. That's $2 million that could either go to Ben Ashley Awards for WGU students, or it could be, new financial aid for incoming public institution students. It being a first come, first serve program, it's really kind of, we wouldn't know until it comes out in the wash, essentially.
Okay.
Representative Glenn.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what happens if they don't get this, if this bill fails? Do they lose out on besides losing out on additional funds for those who underserved, would they lose? What would happen to the institution?
Well, I mean, since WGU arrived in Tennessee, they've been eligible for the Tennessee Student Assistance Award. That was kind of a part of, recognizing them as a competency-based alternative model, which was new to Tennessee, and very celebrated when they arrived. And so, them coming into the general funded scholarship programs, not the lottery, was a part of that conversation from the very first day. And so if this bill does not pass, then the students at WGU will not be receiving the additional, I think it's about $1,700 on average towards their tuition. That's the practical impact of not passing the bill, is that their students who are currently receiving about $1,700 wouldn't receive the additional $1,700.
Last question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if this does pass, then other private institutions would then be able to say, I want some of it too. Does it open the door for a flood of private institutions to come in and say, I want a piece of this too?
I think that historically, it's a door that only lets in one person at a time. And then the door closes, and then somebody has to knock on the door and seek entrance, and then they may or may not get in. The legislature has been very measured in taking on new institutions into our programs, and they do it one at a time. You come and you make an argument for your institution, and that has, some institutions have been successful and some have not. And so, whether it opens up the door to more, essentially the door is there irrespective. And so, we'll see, I'm sure we'll see institutions in the future seeking funds, but they'll have to make the same battle. They'll have to make the same arguments that the WGU is making in this case.
Representative Glenn.
I'm sorry. You made a good point. I think this is more of a statement. So if we pass this, based on what you're saying, the door opens for one at a time. So if we pass it for this institution and then the next one come in and we say no, are we picking the winners and losers? Are we deciding who wins, who loses?
Well, you're certainly picking those who are, who are allowed to receive this funds or not. You can certainly frame it that way.
And again, since the fund is fully subscribed, or it has been for a number of years, $1 for a WGU student means that's $1 that's not available for a student going to some other Tennessee institution. Because the fund is fully subscribed, there's no extra money.
I would make it even a little bit more clear, $1 of the Ben Ashley grant component. WGU students are eligible for the base TSAA award. And so nothing about that changes with this. If this bill doesn't move, they still get that. And so this is about that supplemental award on top of the TSAA award.
Right. The extra money that is offered through the Ben Ashley Opportunity Grant.
Yeah. And because it comes from the same pot, I think your comment holds for that, but making sure that it's the Ben Ashley component, not the base component.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hanneman. We'll go back into session. And maybe let me start out, Chairman Garrett, by giving you the opportunity to answer a general question. We asked Mr. Hanneman a lot of questions, and you may have wanted to respond to some of those.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was a lot to unpack, and I appreciate the comments and the testimony. One thing that was running through my mind as he was speaking is it looks like, this is a popular scholarship that we need to advocate for potential more funding for this, for any type of college that could qualify with this type of award that it does for our students that need it, right? It's like my example. I couldn't afford Vanderbilt. I couldn't afford law school at UT and whatnot. So when I went to the National School of Law, I paid for it, but it was at a substantial cost, less than what those institutions were. I wasn't obviously 35 when I went to law school. I was a little bit younger, but these are opportunities. I don't think the idea of setting up a scholarship at the beginning, there was an intent to say, we're only going to limit it to 3 people, right? 3 institutions and that be it, because we expand. We've had different ways that we teach. Probably in 2013 when this was done, or excuse me, when Western Governors University came here, 10 years before that, the online world probably didn't exist, that someone could actually get an education online, right? Completely, and able to get into the workforce, be a nurse, be a teacher. So I, have a little bit of concern that we're worried about that it's more people. What that means, in my opinion, is I got more work to do when we get to finance to advocate for potential new funding for this scholarship because of what it's doing for the folks that enter the workforce, for our teachers and for nurses, because God knows we need more of those. And that's my passion behind this piece of legislation, is that it provides that opportunity at hopefully no cost, right? Versus a Vanderbilt's tuition versus what WGU provides. My sense would be, Mr. Chairman and committee, is that for folks that would qualify and seek this type of scholarship, a Vanderbilt, a UT, a Carson Newman, a college like that, that's probably not their target market, right? For someone that has a family, that's a mom, dad looking just to get a little bit more where they might be able to make more money. That's not an opportunity that someone's going to have to say, you know what, Vanderbilt makes sense to me. Nothing against Vanderbilt, nothing against UT and my alma mater, but that's probably not on their radar. You put something like this in front of them that they might be able to get their education paid in full, they're going to take that opportunity, and I hope we can provide that opportunity to them. So that would be my response. Mr. Chairman, thank you for that.
Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sponsor. I'm going to support the bill. And the reason why is because one of the things that in my military time that we as military folks do is a lot of our courses are online. WGU is one of the courses that actually a lot of veterans take to get their degrees. And so I know it does do good work. And a lot of military folks have actually gotten their degrees from it. I do think it would give me a little bit more time to study it going into the next committee to ensure that we're not taking away and we're not hurting the public institutions in a way that we shouldn't be doing. So I'm going to support it, but I do want to look at it a little bit more in depth, especially going into full education. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? And I think this committee has had a culture for a while of trying to be consistent. We get requests like this frequently. Usually it's for lottery money. This is actually out of the general fund, but we're trying to be consistent so that when these requests or legislation comes forward, we're treating them all the same way. I think that's what a lot of us have in mind. Okay, well, if there's no other discussion, then we're ready to vote. Madam Clerk, open the vote. Has everyone voted? Anyone wish to change their vote? If not, take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 ayes and 1 nay.
Motion passes and the bill goes to full education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, next up on our agenda is item number 3 by Chairman Hicks.
Motion, second.
You've got a motion and a second. And Chairman Hicks, do you have an amendment?
Yes, sir, I do. That drafting code is 3865.
Okay, that's what we've got. Would you like to have us put this on the bill, or do you want to explain the amendment instead?
Mr. Chairman, I can explain it right quick if you want me to.
Okay,
and
sure.
That'll be fine. So what the amendment does.
Yeah, motion and a second on the amendment.
Thank you.
You're ready to proceed.
The amendment clarifies THEC's authority to identify capital investment needs for the state. And I'll get a little more further deeper into that as I explain the bill, but that's what the amendment does. That's
Okay.
all.
Okay, motion's been made on the amendment. All in favor of putting the amendment on the bill, all in favor say aye. Opposed? The amendment goes on the bill. You are recognized on your bill as amended.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Committee. So House Bill 1227, after working with higher education institutions and other stakeholders, House Bill 1227 proposes language to modernize current processes to allow for maximum efficiency in THEC's work in Tennessee's higher education landscape without sacrificing the state's touch point on accountability and stewardship. This legislation further provides some clarity and alignment to historical practice to aspects of THEC's student-facing functions and responsibilities. And so some of the components of the bill, as far as modernization is concerned, the bill adds new language to clarify THEC's commitment to work on student access and outreach initiatives to further stress THEC or TSAC's commitment to addressing the state's educational and workforce needs. Also revises THEC's responsibilities related to tuition and fees. The proposed language surrounding THEC's role in setting a tuition and fee increase policy allows for institution-specific flexibility while maintaining an overarching focus on student affordability. Also, talking about clarification and alignment, talking about those components. It clarifies the current definition for a quality non-degree credential to include those programs that culminate in a registered apprenticeship, occupational licensure, or a certificate in addition to industry certifications. And these elements were inadvertently left out of the draft language when the definition was added. That's what the amendment also does. Let me back up. These elements were inadvertently left out of the draft language when the definition was added to the code 2 years ago, actually. And then also the bill clarifies that any search for THEC's executive director position is subject to the same public notice and confidentiality provisions that our institution presidents and chancellors are subject to currently. And then finally authorizes THEC to delegate some academic program approval powers to the executive director, allowing for selective action between commission meetings. That's new language permits an expedited approval process for certain academic programs and offsite campus locations, which in turn will allow institutions to be more responsive to the market demands. And that's what the bill does.
Okay, members, you've heard the explanation. Any discussion? Okay, question's been called. Without objection, Madam Clerk, please open the board for voting. Would any member like to change their vote? Every member's voted. Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 5 ayes and 0 nays.
House Bill 1227 moves to full education. Okay, last item on our agenda is item number 5. This is House Bill 738 by Representative Parkinson. You have a motion and a second on your bill, and I understand you've got an amendment.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if you give me a second for a point of personal privilege.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. One of our Bartlett aldermen are here, Mr. Kevin Quinn, and I just want to make him feel welcome.
Welcome. Welcome to House Higher Ed Sub. Representative Parkinson, would you like to put your amendment on the bill now or
Yes,
when
sir.
it gets to the lottery calendar?
I would like to put it on now.
Okay.
And if you remember, the reason we rolled it to this week was to do just that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that'll be fine.
Yes, sir.
Do we have a motion and a second on the amendment? Oh, we do have a motion and a second. Okay, you're recognized on the amendment.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you. And all this amendment does is clarifies, which students that we're talking about. And we are talking about those students that are already, that graduate from a dual enrollment cosmetology or barbering course in high school and then seek to go to a TCAT.
Okay, members, you've heard the explanation. Any questions or discussion? Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure, did you say this will be going to the lottery calendar?
Yes, it is, but we want to add, we're getting ready to attempt to add the amendment before
Okay.
we
Oh.
send it to the lottery calendar. Okay, any other questions? Then we are voting to add Amendment 4246 to House Bill 738. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Amendment 4246 goes on your bill, House Bill 738. Okay, and any discussion on the bill? If not, then we are going to send the bill to the lottery calendar to be heard at a later date. So moved. Thank you. Is there any other business to come in front of this committee? And the lottery calendar will be heard with our final calendar on the same day. Okay, if there's no other business, then we are adjourned.